one of the things I think I've talked about before in one of these videos is to do with, I guess, symbolic images. Specifically, what I'm thinking of right now is a shape called the ouroboros, which is a shape from, well, it's a design from all kinds of spiritual and mystical traditions. It's an image of a snake consuming its own tail. And although it does feature in those kind of traditions, it's also been reworked into other more contemporary frameworks of knowledge. I know Francisco Varela uses it as a simple symbol for re-entry in some of his logics, and I've seen it used in a kind of cosmological book called The View from the Center of the Universe by Joel Primack and Nancy Abrams, as a way of talking about and visualizing really how the universe operates at different scales, and how different physical laws come into being at different scales, and how those can be perhaps conceptualized in one single image. And they use what they call the cosmic ouroboros as a symbol for that. I'm not really saying there are magical snakes in the world. I'm just saying it's an image which has got some currency, and it's one that I've found quite useful in different ways. In fact, I found it very useful to the extent that I had an ouroboros tattooed on my arm about a year ago, just to kind of remind myself that this is an image I could come back to and find useful. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, in relation to the specifics of what I'm thinking about right now and how that kind of feeds into that image. One of the, I guess they're experiences, they're interpretations of experience more than anything else, but one of the experiences that I have is the one I'm having right now. Here I am in this field in Cheshire, this beautiful morning. Being Cheshire, it's quite flat, I've got good visibility around myself, and I can choose to look at something. So I can look out, and basically have this kind of naive psychological experience of looking out into a real world and seeing an object in that world. Here I am, subject-predicate-object relationships. I'm seeing my dog, whose name is Guy. His paw is better now, so he's out with me today. And I'm seeing Guy, and I have a very distinct sense of the separation, literal separation in space, but all kinds of other separations between myself and my dog. Completely intuitive. But if I think about it a bit further, and I look at the dog, and I think about what's happening with that dog, and I conceive of all the experiences and physical processes that are going on in my dog. You know, how he's going through those physical routines that I've spoken about before in terms of like fountain. You know, there's all those cells in his body are dying and being replaced. All the food that he ate yesterday and the day before is turning back into Guy. All those kind of processes are going on, which so that stable image of a dog that I have in my visual field right now is something of an illusion. It's actually, I'm seeing the kind of still point of a standing wave in a sense, in terms of the material flowing through the dog. And also he's completely embedded within the kind of ecological experiences that again flow through him. You know, he's walking on this flat surface of the ground because we have this law of gravity, and so his relationship to the ground is a unified relationship. The ground and the dog and the paws and the compression of the paws as they touch the ground are all part of that same system. So he's systematically embedded within that. He's also, obviously consuming the air as he breathes and giving out carbon dioxide as he breathes, and that process again is completely part of that. The various atomic and subatomic forces that are going through him, the electromagnetic processes that are going through him, are all of a piece with the environment in which he's embedded. So when I'm looking at it, what I can kind of conceive of is as a series of connections and mergings and blendings, so that whilst Guy appears to be, a solid figure on a green background, what's actually going on there, if I think about it for a moment, is I can kind of see him can't really see him, but I can kind of feel a sense in which he is part of a much larger picture, which includes the fields he's standing on, the hedges and so on, the air that's around him. And if I can continue thinking in those terms, I can kind of see the whole field in that way, in the hedge. My other dog, Phoebe, who's sitting here with a tennis ball in her mouth, and the sunlight that's passing through them. So the whole environment starts to be part of that experience. And if I continue that enough, what I can kind of feel is a sense is that, well, I can't not be aware of the fact my own shadow is being cast on the ground in front of me. And if I look down, my own feet are also subject to the same laws that are uniting Guy and Phoebe's body with the ground. So my feet are also part of a kind of interactive systemic relationship and engagement with this environment, and so is the rest of my body, which is also a prey to all those flows, those exchanges, those interactions. The same shedding of skin cells, the same passing through of ecological processes, the same consumptions and exhaustions are also part of my sense of being. Right up to the language I'm using, which are part of a completely embedded system with the activities that I'm doing, the brain processes that are supposed to be going on inside my head, the social and animistic systems, I guess, in which I'm embedded, are all part and parcel of that language, that thought process. Even my conception of what it means to be a self is part of that system, including my sense of being a self, standing in the field in Cheshire, looking out through these two portals at the front of this lump of meat on the top of my neck, and saying these words that are coming out of my mouth now. So, whilst I appear to be here as a subject looking at an object, Guy, in the field, if I trace it far enough, I can see there's a kind of loop which balloons out from Guy and reconvenes somewhere behind my eyes, or at least that's kind of my experience of it, and becomes part of my... And that subjectivity is, in a sense, just part of the same loop. And this is where the ouroboros comes back in again. In a sense, it feels like I'm the head of the ouroboros, the head of the snake, looking at its own tail, is misrecognizing its own tail, and seeing, the tail is stretching out in the body and out beyond its point of focus, and the ouroboros doesn't recognize, perhaps at first, that the tail it's looking at is actually the other end of itself. A bit like a dog chasing its own tail, actually. It'd be great at this point if I could just turn the camera on Guy and there he was chasing his own tail, but he's not quite so compliant. Hey Guy. Anyhow, I know that sounds completely woolly, but it's just an experience, and I thought it worthwhile sharing.